One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Okay, so it's an interesting thing about the way this mini's cast. It's cast in not cast in three pieces. The mold seems to have three pieces. So there's a mold line that goes up the front of the body, up to her face. There's one that comes down the side of her face, down the side of her body, down under the robe. And then there's another one that goes over the top of her head, along the back, down to her feet. And then there's one in this interior space as well. So I think the mold had three pieces put together, and then they pop it apart, and that leaves three mold lines. So when you're preparing this mini to paint, you want to take a little bit of extra time and look carefully and find all three sets of mold lines and get rid of them. My eyes are at the point now where I can't really see the mold lines very well, and I prepped this mini yesterday. I got did a primer and then a little bit of a airbrushed ink on there so the shapes would be visible on the stream. And then I came back and took a look at it about half an hour ago and discovered that there was a lot of mold lines that I hadn't been able to see. So worth taking a bit of extra time to kind of hunt them down and remove them. I removed a bunch just before I came onto the stream here, and that's why the paint is looking all torn up, because I went along with the knife and cut away at the mold lines. There's a few loose chunks of plastic still hanging out on there as a result as well. But that's about as many as I can take off, because we don't have time to just... I could spend the next hour hunting down mold lines, and that wouldn't be very interesting to watch. Okay, so just so people are aware, I'm tracking 3 chat rooms at the same time. One in my Twitch stream, one on the Miniature Monthly Twitch stream, and one on Discord. So if I don't notice you posting in the chat, or I don't answer your question right away, it's because I've got to keep an eye on 3 different rooms. So just either ask your question again, or if you see a question going unanswered and you know the answer, go ahead and post. And just a reminder that this is going out on Discord as well. So if you follow along on the Discord and you're painting along with us, you're welcome to drop photos of your mini in progress in the chat on the Discord. And on there, you can, I'll do my best to give live feedback as we go. Okay? That's the plan anyway. And if I notice that there's nobody following along in the Discord, and people are not asking questions in the chats, then I'll just start painting along at my own speed instead of painting really, really, really slowly and narrating every step that I take. That's the overall plan anyway. Okay, so let's get everything rolling here. We've got the camera on the palette. We've got everything else ready to go. Okay, so for the skin tone. I tried this skin tone yesterday on a different mini. It was interesting the way it turned out, so I'm going to try it again today with a little bit of a modification. So I'm going to use deep red as my kind of darkest shadow color, mixed with the bronze skin shadow. These are all Reaper paints. And I'm going to highlight with rosy skin and creamy ivory. So this is the series that's going to be my skin tones. And I'm going to paint the skin tones first. Let me rephrase that. I'm going to paint the base coat of the skin tone first. And I'm going to go back and I'll do the base coat on a few other things as well, so that they're nice and dry when I come back to do the highlighting. That poor bronze skin shadow has been nearly empty for a while. It keeps spraying bubbles every time I use it, but it's not empty yet. Not quite empty yet. I have a new one on standby. I like that paint a lot. I use it quite a lot. But, yeah, that's why it's making funny noises. All right. The other base coat I'm going to want to do almost right away is going to be the leather. And the leather we're going to use Reaper's Ruddy Leather. And we're going to highlight that with Orange Brown and Harvest Brown. I forgot to put Harvest Brown on the list of paints for today. It doesn't really matter. You can make Harvest Brown by mixing Orange Brown with the Ruddy Leather, or something close to it. Now, things are really dry at the moment, so I'm getting lots of flakes of dried paint falling off my paint bottles into the palette. And those are a bit annoying. They'll just show up as chunks in the paint at some point. So I'm just going to clean some of those up before we get going. There, get rid of this. Okay, and the other base coat that I want to put on is going to be the Snow Shadow. That's going to be for that cloak, or robe I guess it is, that's going to be over top of the armor. And we're going to highlight that one with probably Creamy Ivory and Dragon White, but I'll get those on the palette for now anyway. And the hair color is going to be blonde. So I'm going to start by putting Leather Brown as a base coat on the hair, and we'll go from there. That's a whole lot of colors, probably too many to be putting on there at once, but it's done now, so. All right, how's the focus looking? Not too bad. Just got to make sure it's on a fixed focal length so that it doesn't jump all over the place while we're painting. That looks just about right. Yep, I'm happy with that. Okay. That was my mom. Always answer the phone when your mom calls. Or I do. Anyway. Alright, so for the skin tone, I'm going to start with the deep red. And I'm going to mix deep red and this bronze skin shadow color together. And it's a bit of like a mahogany color, but a bit paler. And this is going to be the first coat of paint that I put on the skin tone. I don't know, looks a bit weird, but just bear with me. And I promise you there's a plan. There's a plan in place. All right, so I'm going to start with the face, and my intention is to put a relatively thin coat of paint on. So I don't have a lot of paint loaded on the brush. I have thinned it just a little bit with water because it's quite dry here today. Things are drying very fast. But one of the key things to getting a smooth base coat on the skin is don't repaint areas that are already slightly kind of drying. Just work in one direction. So if you lay down a layer of paint, don't go back to fix it. Just move along, paint the next layer, or paint the other areas that are going to be the same color. And if you need to go back once that first layer of paint is dry to make corrections. Okay, another decision that I made a little bit earlier was that she's got gloves on. It's a little bit hard to tell from the sculpt, but for sure one hand has a glove. So I'm going to treat the Mini as though both hands have gloves. So they're going to be the color of the leather armor, not skin tone. You're free to do, of course, whatever you want, but that's my plan for this particular figure. So just working my way around the Mini, painting all the skin tones or arm. The arm looks pretty rough there. It's because I just hacked a whole bunch of mold lines off a couple of minutes ago. And we got to get her back under here. And what's next? The legs. She's wearing sandals, so we want to make sure we paint her feet the skin tone color as well. And she's got these armored greaves on her legs, but they just go down to her ankle. So make sure you get her ankles as well. And then the back of her legs. There's these leather straps that hold on to the armor, as well as the straps on the sandals. So we're going to make sure we get all the skin in behind there as well. Miss any spots? No, that looks all right. Okay. So just as before we start doing any highlighting, my intended light direction is basically she's looking almost directly towards the light. So it's got like a sunlight coming down on her this way. You can see the way I've marked it on the base. So there's the light direction right there. Just kind of her eye line goes straight along the bow, and the light is coming just a little bit to the right of that. And then you can see the shadow side. Okay, shadow, light. So every time we're doing highlighting, we're just going to keep in mind that the light is coming from that side. Okay, it's dried fairly well. I'll do another quick coat of that same color. And yeah, just a touch of water in there. I'm gonna do that color again. Thin coat. I know it probably looks like I'm globbing the paint on there in the camera, but there's not much paint loaded on the brush. So it's going on quite thin. I might have to make all those mold lines into injuries because I make them look like they're wounds or something and she's been fighting battles. Because I did quite a lot of damage to certain parts of the figure trying to get the mold lines off. And normally I would do that, of course, before I primed the mini. I didn't use primer, bear in mind. I just put a first coat of paint on her. These Reaper Bones minis don't need a primer. They just need a first coat of paint that's going to stick. So I did that with the airbrush, put a coat of black paint on there, and then did a bit of a Zenithal style highlight with some ink. And as a result, that's looking pretty chewed up from I'm removing all the mold lines. Okay, so I'm going to use the ruddy leather now, and I'm going to go and the main part that I'm interested in really is this skirt. I want this leather skirt to be painted fairly early on, because I'll probably do quite a bit of highlighting on that. I'm less concerned about the straps on the sandals, belt pouches, that kind of thing. Those are details that I'm going to do at the end. The main thing I'm concerned about is that armored skirt. And that's going to take a couple of coats as well. We're going to do her gloves the same color. I think it's possible that she's got a glove on one hand but not the other. But we're just going to paint her as though she's got gloves on both hands. using my favorite size 2 Winsor & Newton. That if you followed along in the painting before Christmas, I used this brush every week and gave up after about 5 minutes. It seems to have finally gotten broken in. It's behaving really well. I think I'll do that arrow quiver right now as well. Not too worried about the straps. I just want to do the main part of it so that I can see where the boundaries of the robe are, this white robe that we're going to do. Okay, so it goes, look at this belt pouch. So the robe goes along there. There's the armor. The robe is in here as well. So that's an armor, sorry, I'm off screen. That's an armor plate. That's robe. That's the armor plate. That's armor plate. That's a little dagger. And then down here, that we'll treat as a piece of the robe, and we'll treat that's a piece of the robe. Robe, 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 robe. Okay. You might be wondering, why did I outline that with the leather brown color? Our armor, for the most part, is going to be kind of bronze looking, and the brown is going to disappear underneath that when I do the bronze armor, so I'm not worried about that showing up later. Okay, I'm grabbing Snow Shadow now. And Snow Shadow is going to be the base color of our robe. Am I going to make mistakes and get other colors on this robe as we go today? Yes, it's going to happen. Am I worried about it? No. It'll happen. We'll fix them. No big deal. A little bit too much paint on my brush right there. Paint's a little bit thin as well. So I normally spread the painting of these minis out over about 3 hours in each of these paint-alongs. But I don't see anybody in the Discord. So maybe I'll just keep painting along my own speed. If there's anybody out there painting along live, let me know. And I'll slow down. And if you're out there and you're not painting along, you're just watching, but you have questions, by all means, go right ahead and ask. I'm interested to hear your questions. Quite happy to make this a conversation about miniature painting. I briefly considered doing this white as a bit of a, like a sheer or kind of partly transparent fabric, but I figured that might be a bit much for something that was intended to be a beginner friendly paint along. Right on, Zox. Glad to see you're hanging out. got any questions or you just want to chat, by all means, I'm happy to talk. As anybody who knows me, I'm sure is well aware that I'll talk the ear off of just about anybody. All right. Gotta get the bits of robe at the back in there as well. And in there. Doing transparent cloth over not over non-metallic metal, over true metallic metal. That feels like it would be quite a challenge. I might have to try that one of these days, but that day is not this day. You can really see the chunks where I tore pieces in the Mini out trying to get the mold lines off. Always worth spending that extra time to get the mold lines off. At first, it always feels a bit like not always, but it feels like an onerous sort of job. But once you get practiced at it, it's pretty easy. It goes quickly. When you forget to do it, or you don't do it very well, that's when it becomes a problem, because you'll discover the mold lines halfway through the miniature being painted. And once you find them, you can never really unsee them. You know they're there. And you end up spending a lot of time removing mold lines and then trying to fix the damage. So it's better just to get them done at the start and become proficient at the job. I know I haven't talked about, well, I did talk about the light direction overall, but I haven't really talked about how I'm going to do the highlighting, and I'm not too worried about that just yet. We'll worry about that once. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. It's only a problem when you realize that, the Mini's almost done and you missed a whole mold line. Or you, as I did today, you've got a Mini ready to go for a particular activity, and then you discover that you missed something fairly substantial, and it's going to take a long time to fix the damage. I don't imagine most people are painting live and finding their Minis in the or their mold lines in the process. All right, this is the leather brown I'm using, Reaper Leather Brown, and it's going to be one of the base colors for this blonde hair that we're doing. Can't remember the name of the person that I had in mind when I chose this color scheme. Oh. Definitely going to need 2 coats of this color. It's very thin and behaving a bit oddly today. Okay, we'll let that have a bit of time to dry. Haven't really decided what color I want to do the bow yet. I guess this handle area should probably be like a leather. This in here could be wood. Maybe it's like a wooden bow or laminated bow with a leather cover on it. I mean, you could pretty much make it any color you want, right? Let's put a pale, let's just use this leather brown color on it, and we'll turn it into wood later. So I'm going to put a base coat of leather brown on the bow as well. Could be laminated bone, I guess. There's all kinds of different ways to make bows. And all kinds of different ways to protect them, put covers over them. I think the bowstring needs this color too. It's a bit premature to be painting the bowstring, but whatever. Yeah, that's a drag, eh? When you get to that stage of the Mini and then find a mold line like that, or just rough work like that. I painted a Battletech Mini, and it turned out really, really well. I was really pleased with the way it looked. And then I didn't notice until I varnished it that it actually had an engraved camouflage pattern on it. So the lines were nearly invisible, and as I said, my eyes are starting to go, but I didn't see that until after the varnish went on it, and I started looking at it not under my main lights, but under just normal room lights. And yeah, the base, I mean, if you can picture a Mini covered in a pattern made of mold lines, that's what it looks like. This is on the WizKids Battletech Minis from the 90s, early 2000s, something like that. They're pretty rough looking figures. I should have known that there'd be something like that going on and been more careful about it, but didn't notice it until way too late. There's no way I was going to repaint the Mini at that point. And somebody wanted to buy it from me, and I was just like, no, I think that's going back in my cabinet of stuff that nobody can ever have. I'm sure someday somebody will be in here and we'll do a Battletech demo or something, and I can drag that out and chuck it on the table. I think the worst is when a judge or somebody like that notices the mold line in the painting contest. They always see it, and then they tell you that it's there. That doesn't feel too good. Especially where with the contrast entry, you've probably been staring at the model for hours and hours and hours and missed it. All right. I'm thinking about base coating the armor. Yeah, I'm going to base coat the armor now. So my plan for the armor is I'm going to use, for the first time in, what's this, the 12th session, I'm going to use a non-Reaper paint. This is Vallejo Brassy Brass. It doesn't look like it. It looks like Prince August, which is the brand name that Vallejo is sold under in France, which is where I picked this up. So I'm going to use Brassy Brass as my base color, and then I'm going to highlight it with Tarnished Brass. And I might do a bit of a glaze of kind of orange or something over it, but that's going to be my ancient bronzy looking armor. If you're ever trying to find rare, not rare, but hard to find Vallejo paints, You can always do a search to see if there's anybody selling Prince August. They're made under license. I think they're made in Ireland, under license by this company, Prince August. And it's the same. It's the exact same paint. When I ran out of ivory and couldn't find it, I'm now using Prince August ivory. It's the exact same paint. It even has the same number on it. Instead of being 72 or whatever, 918, it's just 918. Same paint. All right, so Brassy Brass. You can use this as the base coat on all the armor. So that's going to be the bracers, the greaves, and the breastplate. I think that's all the armor pieces. People who haven't been watching me paint before are probably wondering, why is he base coating everything before finishing any one piece? And the main reason I'm doing that is so that I can finish the whole mini during one 3-hour session. If I paint part of the mini and then have to wait for it to dry before finishing that detail, then the painting session takes a lot longer. And we're trying to keep them down to under 3 hours. But all those principles of things like choose something on the inside to paint first and then work your way out so that you don't accidentally hit something you finished with metallic paint, reaching in to paint something. All those things are good advice, but we're not following our own good advice today. We're just gonna... There's that chunk of plastic that came off when I did the mold line. Still sitting on the mini. All right. Greaves. Bracers. There we go. There's the other bracer. Might put a coat of this on all the jewelry as well. I'll decide that later, though. The jewelry's going to get all hit with a lot of paint when we do the highlighting on the skin. So I'll come back and do the jewelry later. And the breastplate. Nice and quiet here today. I like it. There's a new gymnasium in the basement of this building. And when there's lots of people in there for classes, it gets pretty loud. The sound echoes all through the building. Today, they're closed on Sunday, so it's nice and quiet down there today. I was about to say too quiet, but it's not. I like a little bit of quiet once in a while. Okay, that's interesting. By painting this, I've discovered that I missed skin on part of her arm in there. Right in there. So I'm going to go back and fix that. Okay, I think missed one whole greave. All right, we'll do the right leg now. I just painted the leather strap from the green as metal. Not a big deal, fix that later. Oh, seem to be drifting. Oh, yeah, imagine. I forgot that was happening. That's today, isn't it? The Super Bowl? So, yeah, imagine it's pretty quiet. Everybody's at home watching TV. Or in a bar watching TV, or whatever. Yeah. Okay, there. Now I think we got all the important pieces done. And we need to go back and do one little touch up on the skin tone. I missed that one spot. Use a smaller brush now. Let's grab it a size 0 to do the rest of the skin with. Have to mix just a little bit more skin tone up. Our mist is right in that little crevice right in there. Right in there. Now that she's upside down, I can see a few other spots that I missed, but it's all good. Oh, we're not painting the hands. Don't paint the hands. Okay. So, Bronze Skin Shadow from Reaper is our next paint. And I am going to be using just a little bit of Flow Improver today. Go Sports Ball. Yay, sports. Right on. Put it right there, I guess. I always forget where the Flow Improver is on the palette and then accidentally mix other paint into it. Okay. Everything seems to be working. Yep. Okay, so I want to try to preserve some of that. So the reason I am using just a little bit of the Flow Improver is that the way things are drying out here today, the Flow Improver acts a little bit as a retardant, and it keeps the paint from drying quite so quickly. And I normally don't paint with it, but I find sometimes at this time of year, I just need it to keep the paint from drying out quite so fast. It can also be helpful for doing some blending, to give you more time to work with the paint. But the main reason I did it today just is so things dry a little bit more slowly. So this is going to be essentially a base coat, and my light direction is this way. So all my brush strokes now, I'm trying to pull the paint towards the highlight. So if I do that on the leg first, that'll make it obvious. So there's the leg. The highlight, center of the highlight is going to be about there. Okay. Is that visible? Do I need to change the angle a little bit to make the lighting easier? Okay, so the center of the highlight's going to be about there, facing the light direction. So when I go to add this highlight, I don't want to completely cover my shadow, but I start pretty close to it. And all my brush strokes pull out from the shadow towards the highlight. Okay, so those brush strokes come all the way forward to the highlight. And then I go from the opposite direction. So I'll start in here, and I'll pull forward from the shadow towards the same center of the highlight. And these highlights then are going to overlap, or these layers of paint are going to overlap, give me quite a strong highlight in the center. Do the same thing as I'm painting her face. Paint pulling forwards towards the forehead. Pull forward towards the chin. Pulling forward. I find at this time of year I get a lot of where the paint's dry in a way that I'm not used to. Things to get quite chalky. So that's one thing that I'm really watching for in this particular paint job, is I don't want it to look very chalky. Still trying to remember the name of that character from that Wonder Woman movie. I'll probably remember sometime tomorrow. I think the actress is Danish. No. Connie Nielsen? Does that sound right? Anyway, that's the hair color I was thinking of when I was making the plan for this mini. And there's a great mold line. Oop. Yeah, I need to move that forward some. Mold line right across her face. I could probably be using a larger brush for this, but I don't know. This brush is making me happy today. The lighting is really odd today. Hippolyta. So who was the actress that played Hippolyta? Hey, Christine. No, I don't think so. I don't think she's even in that movie, is she? Wonder Woman? Or am I getting it wrong? Is it The Mentor I should be thinking of? I don't know. Connie Nielsen. Okay, right on. Everything feels very dark here today. I think I'm getting a Robin Wright. There you go. Right on. Princess Buttercup. Love it. All right. So now I'm going to start lightening the skin tone with this rosy skin. I can add that right into the bronze skin shadow. Just a touch of flow improver, same reasons as before. Oh, I can't seem to stay on screen today. So I'm building up highlights in the skin, facing the light direction. Remember, as I said, the light is basically just a little bit to the right of her line of sight. So her right cheek is going to be slightly lighter than the left one, but not by much. It's a bit of an awkward angle to reach in there to get past the bow and the bowstring. Yeah, and paint's getting very chalky on me already. It's just a combination of this particular paint, temperature, humidity, all that good stuff. I find the rosy skin can be pretty good, but some days it's very chalky. All right. Do the other part of her arm down here. It's kind of awkward keeping the miniature stationary for the camera. So remember, our highlight is right out there in the front of the leg. So I'm going to be pulling all the brush strokes up to around that point. Start fairly far down, so quite close to our shadow we started with. Always pulling forward towards that light source. And then we'll come from the other direction and overlap those two things, those two layers in the center of the highlight. One of the ways to reduce the apparent chalkiness is to glaze, and we'll come back at the end to glaze the midtone, and that'll help resolve some of that. chalkiness just a little bit. So that's the center of my highlight on the other leg. Very hard to get at because of the bow. So I'm not going to try to overlap them in the center. Basically just going to pull the paint forward to that line. And then I'll have to do the same thing from the other side. You can see it's very difficult to get the brush through the bow. So I'll just have to be slow and careful, work in a small area. And try not to overpaint too much. By which I mean like not doing extra brush strokes in an area which is already starting to dry. And as I said, it's very dry here today, so things are drying quickly. So it's very easy to go to do too many brush strokes in something which is starting to dry, and you get the streaks, you tear up the paint, you get lumps, you get that chalkiness. So they're doing the other side of her face. Get a very intense look on her face. Happy with that. I think I need to reach that a little bit further down though, into the shadow. Looks a little too dark to me. And there, of course, I just did it. That wasn't quite dry. So I just lifted up the paint again and created some chunks. Do the other arm. Then coming from the shadow side forward, I could overlap those two pretty much right at the top. See if I can get a top-down view so you can see the spot where they're overlapping there in the center. Same thing here. Come from the other side, need to go this way. All right. And her back, we get to do this color on her back under there just a bit. And the back of that arm, I missed the back of that arm earlier. So I'm going to go back one step to the straight, what was that color called? Bronze shadow, and fix that. Athena and Eternals. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's Angelina Jolie, right? Oh, that's the wrong arm. This arm. Now this is pretty much all in shadow, this part of the body, but I'm going to give it this first layer of highlight, just so it doesn't seem quite as dark. The shape's still visible even though it's in the shadow. All right. And feet. There's a little round shape on her ankle and her heel. And then we want to do a highlight on the top of her foot. And we'll highlight each of her toes as well. And unfortunately, one of those mold lines I was talking about goes right across the top of her foot. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge to remove. There, we've got a little bit of a flood on the go there too. I like that. That gives us something to fix later. Just a little bit of a highlight on that calf muscle. Not too much, though. I thought that was a streak, but it's actually where I damaged the plastic removing the mold lines earlier. All right. Oh, the other foot. I could do the other foot. Same thing. There's a little ball on her ankle. Top of her foot. And toes. This model has very carefully sculpted toes. The toenails are visible. It's kind of interesting. All right. So the next step is I'm going to take the rosy skin and go one level lighter. So I'll grab some of that rosy skin. And you know, you should never mix your paint with your best brush. So that's what I'm doing. Use my size 0 here as a mixing stick. Get the paint all up in the ferrule like you're not supposed to. Let it dry out a bit. Okay. And now we're going to do the nice rosy skin highlight. All the same places as before. Just smaller. So I'll start up here on her face. She's got this furrowed brow. So a nice highlight on that. Pulling towards the light direction. A little bit of a knot in her forehead right there. And then her brow highlighted. And this is approximately the point of brightest light right about there. So I'll highlight her cheek. And that side of her nose. And her upper lip. And then I'm going to come down from beside her eye. Meet that highlight that I just did. And connect it to the side of her face by her mouth. And then we want to give her a nice highlight on her chin. There's a lovely sculpted eyelid as well. You can highlight that too if you feel up to it. She's looking pretty mutant right now. I like it. So let's fix the other side of her face before we make everybody offended. Other cheek. Yeah, that's looking pretty rough. Oof. So how do we fix that, I wonder? Well, I don't wonder, I know how I'm going to fix it. We're going to keep highlighting to bring out the shapes. And then at the end we're going to glaze to smooth it all out again. That's the plan. Whether it will work is a different story, but that's the plan. Get that prominent tendon in her neck because she's so muscular. There we go. And now the other ones again as well. Smaller highlights this time, but the same plan. try to highlight. I did quite a lot of damage to her bicep there when I was removing the mold lines. Maybe give that little tricep there. Tricep? Yeah. A highlight. Her elbow, a little bit of a highlight. But her bicep is pretty much mangled beyond repair at this point. Fortunately, we've got this armband blocking most of it. And that'll conceal some of the damage. We'll do the opposite arm. Run the highlight kind of in a line along the arm right about there. So I'm going to highlight up to that. I'll come at that from the other side. There's her shoulder. Wow, drifting. Dun, dun, dun. Did all that. We're going to do this leg. Same highlight position about there. Everything is very streaky today. Probably has a lot to do with my choice of a very small brush as well. Probably getting a better result with a slightly larger brush. It's a little better. And other side of that leg. Okay, now we're doing the feet again. Heel, ankle, top of the foot. Toes. Trying to keep the toes distinct from each other. Ball of the ankle. A bit of the heel. Same thing on the other foot. Okay, did I miss anything that I need to highlight? Not really. Shoulder could be a little bit better. Good enough. All right. Need to let that dry a little bit before we proceed. So I'm going to start doing some highlighting on leather, I think. Yeah. So I had the ruddy brown, or ruddy leather was the start color. And then I had harvest brown and orange brown on the palette. So I'm going to mix a little bit of ruddy leather and orange brown. And this will be the first highlight color on the leather. So the leather's on the gloves and on this leather skirt. These are really the main areas I'm interested in. So I'm going to start with this glove here, which is right hand. I'm just going to highlight the back of it. Now you can do a lot of leather texture. Some people do it by stippling, by painting little lines. You can also create a leathery looking texture by varying the pressure. Like do a little bit of pressure, more pressure, less pressure, and it changes the amount of paint that flows off the brush. And it gets a bit more of an organic look to it when you do that. Now, not super concerned about that today. Mostly just want to have the highlighting give a sense of the light direction, which is this way. So we're going to make the front of the skirt lighter than the back. And hopefully also fix some of the damage from removing mold lines as we go. Okay. I'll do the other leg. The other leg is not going to get the light directly. It's going to be kind of more on that left side from our perspective. But where this is just the first highlight color, I'm going to go most of the way around the leg. Just to bring the color up. And now we're going to do the same thing again, but this time with just straight harvest brown. And now I'm going to do these highlights differently. So that leg's going to get a separate highlight from this leg. So the brightest part on the leather is going to line up with the brightest part on the leg, which is right about there. Line those two highlights up. Do the same thing on the other leg. The brightest part is there, so the brightest part on the skirt is going to be just above that brightest part of the leg. There we go. Oh, I forgot one spot, didn't I? I forgot to do the other glove. So go one step back down, grab that slightly darker color, and I'm going to do the fingers on that other glove and the back of the hand. Okay, now I'm back to using straight harvest brown. So I had done that on this part of the leg. You do it on the back of this hand. To the fingers, and then that hand on the bow. To the fingers. And a little bit at the top of the back of the hand, not too much. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat that color again on the leg. So there's my highlight there. And reinforce this color in the area directly above that highlight. So those two highlights line up. Same thing on the other leg. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to grab, what was this color? Orange brown. I'm going to mix some orange brown into the harvest brown. Much lighter color. That's not much lighter, it's a little bit lighter. I was inserting this color is not drying out nearly as fast. Like the bits of the rosy skin there are almost dry on the palette, even though the palette is swimming. But this color seems to be doing really, really well. It's not drying out too fast. So for this next orange color, I'm going to do the knuckles, fingers, and the back of the hand close to the light. It's okay if that's a little irregular looking, because the leather is not going to look perfectly smooth. And then we do the same thing on this part of the skirt. Smaller highlight than the last one, but it's still a pretty big highlight. Focus in the area directly above the highlight there. Same thing on the other leg. There we go. I like it. Okay. Now we do the hand holding the bow, top of the thumb, on the palm, little highlights on the fingers, all the way around to the knuckles. And then just a little bit at the very top of that hand on the shadow side of the bow. Okay. I'm all right with that. Okay, I think our skin tone is probably dried enough now that we can risk doing some more work on it. So I'm going to grab some rosy skin. And I'm going to add a bit of creamy ivory into it. It's going to lighten it quite a bit. And I can see it already starting to dry in the palette. So I'm going to add just a hint of the flow improver, just a little bit. Hopefully keep it, to slow down the drying just a bit. All right, now what I'm looking to do, I'm going to create highlights closest to the light, basically just directly towards the light. And these ones are going to be smaller than the ones we did last time, but the center of these highlights lines up with the ones we did on the leather and the ones that we did on the leg earlier. We want all of this to line up into a single line. So there's our line there. So we bring the highlight in from both sides, overlap it. It's a nice bright highlight there in the middle of her leg. Do the same thing on the other leg. Even though the bow would probably be casting a shadow there, some of the legs getting the light directly. Okay, we'll do that from the other side as well. Push a little bit of paint in there to get it in place, and then work it a little bit before it dries, and then stop so I don't mess it up too badly. There we go. My brush is getting all dried out. Let's tie that up a little bit. Okay. Reload the brush. Do the same thing we just did there on her leg. We're going to do that on her face. And we want these highlights to all line up. So the line like that, so the position on her head, the highlight is brightest right about there. Same thing on her cheek. And same relative position on her chin. It's hard to judge where her mouth starts and ends on this figure. She's got this little smirk on the go. I can't tell if it's making her look a little bit cat-like. So I'm just going to paint over that upturned corner of her mouth with this lighter color. And I'll correct that when I paint her mouth in a moment. A bit on her brow. A little highlight on that eyelid. Other eyelid as well. Clean the tip of the brush off. Right, I was working on the side of her face up there. A little better. Not much, but a little bit better. Now, the question of eyes. I'm pretty confident painting eyes, so I don't mind doing the eyes last. Some people prefer to do the eyes first. It really depends on what your comfort level is. I tend to paint the eyes whenever I feel like I'm looking at the Mini and I can't really figure out what she's looking at, what her expression is, kind of what she's intending on doing. And that's when I'll paint the eye, because that'll help sort of clarify the story of what's happening for me a little bit. I can feel a little bit better that I understand, or have I can refine the story then, kind of things will make more sense to me. So I feel like I need to paint her eyes now. So I'm going to finish doing this color and the highlights first, and then I'm going to paint the eyes. Now for painting the eyes, we're going to want our kind of our best brush, the nice tip on it, and we're going to paint the eyes a dark color first. And she's looking pretty much straightforward. So I'm going to do a kind of a standard basic eye. We're going to paint the socket dark, then we're going to paint the whites of the eye in the whole eye, and then we will paint an iris pretty much in the center of all of that. And depending on how much, these are quite small eyes, we might have to leave it at that, or I might add a little dash of color in there. We'll decide that in a minute. Okay, so I didn't highlight her feet with this color. I think her feet are light enough already. But now we're going to do some eyes. So I need a little bit of black on the palette. Okay, so the plan for the eyes. Gonna get my brush loaded up with black. I need just a touch of the flow improver because I can see already that the black is kind of drying out. I mean, I don't know if you can see that, but like the palette is full of water, lots of water, but the paint is still drying out pretty quick on me on the palette. Nature of the beast today. So I'm going to paint the whole eye socket this black, which some people might feel like it's too dark, but I'm happy with it. I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to paint a line on her brow, and I'm going to paint the eye socket. And I want to do that at this time because if I make the brow wrong, I can fix that at the same time as I fix any mistakes I made on the skin tone. So I'm going to do see, look, made a mistake. Line under the brow, and I'm going to fill in the eye socket. The reason I was doing that is to try to bring out the shape of her face a little bit better. And I'll turn the Mini around and do the other brow. And the other eye socket. And I made a pretty good mistake there. The black kind of spread out a bit on me. We'll fix that. Okay. And now I'm going to do, well, you know what I'm thinking? I think these eyes are really, really tiny. So I'm going to try doing the eyes with a two-step eye. So I am going to use the ivory that I put on the palette earlier. Creamy ivory. This is going to be for the whites. I'm going to use a little bit of the flow improvers again. And what I'm going to try to do is paint the whites on the outside. So create the appearance of the eye by painting a little dot on each side of the iris to create the impression of an eye. That went pretty well. Now I'm going to do the one. That one didn't go quite as well. Not horrible. You're not really looking straight ahead, so I might have to redo that. It's not horrible. All right. Just need to touch up the black in her right eye. I think we'll be all right. I don't know how clear that is. Not too bad. You can see it reasonably well, I think. So she's basically looking straight out along the length of her bow, or just past her bow. I'm happy with that. If you do that and you don't like the way it turned out, well, we haven't done too much work on blending and that kind of thing yet, so you can always just go back and paint her face over, or just repaint the eye socket and do it again. I'm going to do a little bit of red from that first shadow color that we did to fix some of the excess dark color that I put on the eye. Would that be the right eye? And I'll match that on the left eye. And then I'm going to clean that up with some of the mid-tone skin tone here. Just tidy it up a little bit. Pretty happy with that. Same thing on the other side. Tidy it up a little bit. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. She's looking pretty fierce. We know what she's aiming at. Okay, so I think I'm going to bring her mouth color back now. So that was a combination of deep red and the bronze skin tone, or bronze skin shadow, with just a touch of the rosy skin in it. So her mouth will be a darker color than the skin around it, but not, I don't want her to look like she's wearing a lot of makeup or anything like that. I just want her mouth to show up. Wasn't super happy with the way her mouth was curled in the corner. So there, her mouth is now visible again. That color might have been a little too dark. Kind of happy with that though. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do on the skin, we're going to go lighter. So I'm going to grab Creamy Ivory, add it to our existing mix there. So this is now like 2/3 Creamy Ivory, 1/3 Rosy Skin. And I'm going to bring up the highest highlights on her face. So that's going to be that little knot that we made in her brow, right above her left eye. and above her right eye, but the highlights are closer to that line we made down the center of her face, or down her center of her right cheek. Pull that highlight up on her right cheek, right eyelid, right nostril, center of her nose. And then I want to connect the highlight on her cheek to the area just alongside her mouth. And then we would need to bring up the highlight on her chin. And I think there's a piece of plastic or something right in the middle of her chin. And that's not going anywhere. It's there permanently now. But we're starting to get a better facial expression. And I get to highlight the upper center part of the cheek opposite the light source. But I don't want to go right up against the nose. I want the nose to cast a little bit of a shadow on her face. I'm going to put a little tiny highlight on that eyelid and over her brow. I think that's it for that face. Could go lighter, but I'm pretty happy with that. I think we want to do another round highlight on that shoulder. It's going to catch the light pretty much directly. Same with that bicep over there. A little bit on the forearm, and I think just this her right leg, at the top center of her right leg, bring the highlight up one more step. And we keep that in line with the leather that we put on earlier. There. Pretty happy with that. No, I'm not. I'm going to do one more step. Creamy ivory. Just straight creamy ivory on her face. We're just in the middle of that cheek. Of course, my brush doesn't seem to be up to the job. The cheek right in the center there. A little round highlight. The eyelid. The brow, that little knot. Tip of her nose. Center of her chin. That straight creamy ivory. And if we wanted to, we could put a little bit of red into her cheeks. We'd do that by grabbing some of that color that I used to make her her lip color. And the main color on her cheeks right now is that mixture of rosy skin and bronze shadow. So we'll grab that color and mix a tiny bit of red into it. We'll thin that quite a bit. We don't want much of it on the brush. And essentially that's just going to add a tiny bit of slightly redder color to her cheek. Oh, that image looks really bad. Everything is really blurry. Wonder what's going on there. Maybe my camera and everything's being overworked. I don't know. Everything on my side is crystal clear. So I don't know what the deal is. It's because the Super Bowl is on and it's the internet is struggling the heaviest that it can the whole year. All right, so I'm going to put that rosy color with an extra little bit of red in it. And I put that kind of in the shadow just below the top of her cheekbone. So he's got that highlight on her cheek. Just putting just a tiny bit of this and a little arc below that to make her cheeks look rosy. Yeah, I agree. It's the We're paying the price for our sports glory today. So a little bit on that cheek. I'm going to do the same thing on the other cheek. And I don't want this to look like makeup. I want it to look like she's exerting herself, like she's fighting. You know, so she's got, her cheeks are a little bit red because she's working hard, she's breathing heavy. And she's figuring out which of the Persians to shoot next, or which of the, I don't know, the satyrs or whoever it is she's fighting against. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. She looks intense. Well, on the upside, the video will still look good. The videos, the recordings are looking really crisp. So even if the Super Bowl does us in for signal quality today, the recordings are going to look all right. I need to tie the elbow color into the shadow color. That's pretty blunt looking back there right now. So I'm just going to use that same rosy color. Put that on the top of her arm and tie the bronze shadow into a highlight on the top of her arm. A little bit more natural. I'm going to do a little bit of that on her back as well, where the shadow would be cast by that cloak. Put a little of that on her back as well. Pretty happy with that. Why am I using this red color to do this bit of blending between the shadow and the highlight? It's because when the light, especially very strong light, goes through skin, your skin is translucent, and this is particularly with like very pale Caucasian skin. Where it comes out the other side, the blood that it passes through makes it look redder. You can see this effect yourself. Just put your hand over a light bulb carefully, don't burn yourself. But you can see where the red, where the light shifts to red where it comes out. And that's why I'm using this rosy color a little bit right in the edge of the shadow to bring back some warmth to the skin. And tie it back into our highlights. Pretty happy with that. It's making me happy. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay. So I think that's enough on skin tone and eyes and that kind of thing. I'm not super happy with that mouth still, but what are you going to do? I know what you're going to do. You're going to redo it again. Let's try making that a little bit rounder. Her lower lip just a little bit rounder. Might as well. We've got the colors on the palette. So I'm aiming just to make that lower lip a little bit more visible. That's a little better. She looks a lot like somebody else. Nope, I've messed it up. Oh well. Yeah, the paint's too dry. She looks like another actress. I'm trying to remember who she is. She's in a lot of... what was she in? 10 Things I Hate About You with Heath Ledger. Yeah, can't remember her name. Doesn't matter. Okay, So now I'm going to do, I think, highlighting on, I don't really know what I want to do. Highlighting on the armor, I guess. So I'm going to do a second coat of brassy brass, because there's a few spots now where I've got other colors onto the brass. Just to touch that up a little bit. So the chest armor's been touched up. Now I'm going to touch up the greaves. There's one spot on this greave that I can't reach because the bow is in the way. And this is where we see the true magical benefits of Bones minis. Just going to bend that the bow out of the way. Touch the top of that, and it's painted. And the figure will slowly revert to its original position. With luck. If it doesn't on its own, I'll have to bend it back later, but for now that's good enough. Okay, so that's fixed. I missed a spot somewhere on her leg, and I'm trying to remember where it was. Ah, in there. Right in there. Right up alongside the cloak. Didn't get the armor color in there, so we'll fix that now. There we go. And missed a spot under that bracer. And did I miss anywhere else? No. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, we're going to do a black wash over... I'm going to do that now. Am I going to do that now? No. First, I'm going to paint some things gold. What gold should we use today? What if we got dragon gold? That's a very gold. Very gold. I think I'll mix some dragon gold with some brassy brass. Dragon gold and brassy brass mixed together to make a dull, dark goldish color. I'm going to base coat the various gold accoutrements with this color. So that is going to be part of this thing around her neck, which is like plates of gold on leather strings. We'll do that. The armbands. She's got this snake armband on this side. And just a single band on the other. And this whole giant belt she's wearing. We're going to do the gems on that blue, and we're going to do the trim on it gold. And this is just a foundation because the dragon gold is quite transparent. It needs a foundation under it or it doesn't look right. So we're using a mixture of the brassy brass and dragon gold as an undercoat essentially, so that when we do paint it gold, it'll look right. That's my plan. I'm sticking to it. Okay. And I'm going to do the gold on the back of her arms as well. Would not be good to miss that. Just bear in mind the skin tone is pretty much finished now, so you want to be careful working close to the skin tone. There. What else do we need to be gold? Nothing. That's good enough. Top of her arm. I was looking at this shape earlier, and I don't know whether that's a knot or a brooch pin of some kind. So I've just now decided that that is like a seashell shaped gold brooch. And we're going to paint that thing gold too. It's like a little knot looking thing on the top of her shoulder. That's now gold. And is that enough? That's enough gold. Okay. Oh no, we missed the thing on her head. She's got this thing inside her hairline. So we're going to put the first coat of gold on that. Bear in mind, we already base coated that part of the hair, so try not to get too much of this color on the leather brown that we already used. Put that down on there. Now, why did I suddenly veer off from doing the armor to doing this? It's because I need to put the black wash on this stuff as well as on the armor, so I'll do it all at the same time. I think I'm going to paint the hilt of that little dagger gold. And we're going to paint... The scabbard will end up being leather color when we're done, but we're going to paint that bit gold. Call this concurrent activity, in a sense. We're getting similar things done at the same time to make life easier for ourselves later. Oh, look, there's the belt shows at the back too, the gold belt. So I'll paint that gold now as well. Pretty happy with that. Okay, coming along. Now, black wash is the next step. How am I going to do this? I'm going to get a pretty fine pointed brush. Julia Stiles, thank you. You're right on the money today there, Shaken 1, 2, 3, 4. No, Shaken 1, 3, 3, 4. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a drop of the Flow Improver to this little puddle of black, and then I'm going to add a whole bunch of water to it. Thin it right down, a little bit of Flow Improver, and then I make sure I don't have very much on my brush. It's about that sort of consistency, right? Not super thick. And now I'm going to go slowly over each of those areas I just painted and let this flow into the recesses. So I'm going to start with the chest armor. And I'm going to go along the edge of the robe. And I'm going slow so that paint can flow off the brush into the recesses. And I want to get all around the outside against the skin tone as well. Just bear in mind, you want to be careful not to flood. If you do get a flood, what do? Grab another brush. I usually have brushes on hand for this, so that when you do the flood, you grab another brush which doesn't have paint on it, which is damp, and you touch the tip of it to the flood you made of paint, and the excess paint will go back up into the brush, and your disaster is averted. It works really, really well. So now I'm going to do, gotta do the back of the chest armor. So why am I doing the black wash? It's going to dull down the shiny armor. And when we paint the highlights, the metallic highlights, the dull areas are going to have even more contrast against the shiny areas. So this bit of dulling down of the paint is going to make everything look shinier later. This little dagger and this belt. It's okay if you get a little bit of this black paint on the blue robe, because we haven't highlighted that yet. We're going to come back and do that later. Okay, so we do the belt all the way around. Cover that gem all the way around the front, the whole dagger. Okay, doing pretty good. Now we got to do the thing on our head. Exactly the same way. Just be careful when you get right to the front, because you're right up against the skin tone. You don't want to get black tide marks on the skin tone if you can avoid it. There we go. Now, another difficult one is the one on her chest. This little necklace looking thing. I'll do the exact same thing on that. Fill it with black. Dull it all down. There we go. Okay, what's left? We've got bracers, greaves, and jewelry still to go. So let's do the stuff on our arms. Nice and slow and careful so you don't make mistakes, because the skin tone is finished. Oh, there I made a mistake. I'll fix that. So I'll clean my brush off, and where I made a big mess, just use the tip of the brush to clean that off before it dries. Just wiggle the brush tip against that bit of wet and clean it up. All cleaned up. All right. Now clean that brush off, reload it with some of the black, that very thin black paint. And I'm going to do the gold armband on the other side. Exactly the same way. What size? No, this is a size 1. Okay. Okay, pretty happy with that. Oh, forgot about the seashell on her shoulder. The seashell on her shoulder gets this treatment as well. And then bracers. Do the left arm bracer first. Sides. And we'll do the right hand bracer. So it's just regular old black paint, Dragon Black, a couple of drops of flow improver, and a whole lot of water to thin it. And dulls everything down. A little bit of black stays in the low spots in the various shapes. Gives it a nice effect. I'll do the greaves. Oop. Off the screen. There we go. Top and bottom. So the schedule of minis that we're painting every Sunday, it's published on my Facebook page. It's published on the Miniature Monthly Discord. It's a whole bunch of different places. And so the schedule is available well in advance, so that if you want to paint along, you'll know in advance what mini we're going to be working on. And you're more than welcome to get that mini. You can either, if you're in the local area here in Halifax, you can come and get it from the studio, or order it online, get it from the Reaper store, from your local game store. And you can join in the painting conversation and chat about what we're painting, why we're painting it a certain way, all that good stuff. And it's really meant for beginners to be able to talk about painting and learn. So everybody's welcome. And This is done simultaneously on the Discord for Miniature Monthly. So if you're actually painting along, you'll be able to drop photos of your minis on the Discord channel and get feedback live as the class goes on. Okay, so we're going to let that dry for a little while. And I think the next thing I want to do, I might as well do the hair since everything around the hair is done. So the hair we started with leather brown. What we're going to do is use some lighter. Oh, the Discord didn't work, Socks? That's weird. That's very weird. Sometimes it doesn't let me do drop links in the chat group on this thing. It has something to do with the permissions. Weird. They gave me a link to use, but it doesn't seem to be working anymore. Let's try. Let's go to events. Events. Share. Copy. Huh. Okay, got it. Paste. Enter. Well, that worked. That's the link to the one today, but there should be a generic link to the Miniature Monthly Discord that gets you to the All the Peeps channel, which is the one that you can join for free. Right on. But if you go to the Discord event channel, it still registers that Miniature Monthly channel on your Discord, and you'll be able to get back to it again. Somebody seems to have decided to start drilling their wall today. All right, so for the hair, we've already got the leather brown. I went up a step. What color is this? I think I went to golden. No. What color is this? Amber gold. I went a little bit higher than I intended. Amber gold. So I'm going to mix a little bit of leather brown. And what we're going to do is what they call paint the volume. We're going to paint the hair without worrying about the hair texture. Just going to paint the overall shapes. So like this piece of the hair here is basically a cylinder. So we're going to highlight it as though it's a cylinder, which means it gets a highlight along its length. And I'm ignoring the texture. Okay, we'll go back and do the highlighting of the texture at the very end. This stretch along here. This stretch along here. The slightly larger cylinder. Slightly larger highlight. Light's coming this way. That's a sphere. If that was sphere getting a highlight, it's only going to show on this side. So we're going to highlight this little blob of hair with a little round highlight, but just on the side facing directly towards the light source, which is like that. We're not going to do that on the bottom. Okay. We're going to look at the top of her head. This bit of her hair here is like a little wave. So we'll put it's a bit like a cylinder, so we'll put a highlight on the top of that. Not directly on the top, but on the side facing the light. Same thing right there. There's another little wave in her hair there. That cylinder as well. We'll do the same thing. Highlight along its length. It's almost like a cone rather than a cylinder, that side. This bit up here we've already highlighted facing the other way. Don't really need to do much to that. And the light could come across and catch this on the top, so we'll do a highlight of that like it's a cylinder, just quite high up though, like it's catching the light. And then this shape, oh wow, that's really zoomed in close, is also like a sphere facing that way, so it's going to get a bit of a highlight facing in that direction. But you all know about the halo effect, which is where that shininess of the hair makes like a little halo ring around the shape. And we will do that, we'll add that halo in a couple of steps when we get closer to the end. So there we've got some waves of highlight. bit under there needs to be highlighted. Waves over there. A bit under there. Okay, I'm happy with that. First highlight on the hair is done. Now I'm going to go straight up to the amber gold, not a mix. Need a smaller brush. So amber gold, and we're going to highlight the amber gold with the golden blonde at the end. So there's two Reaper sets that I like for doing blonde hair. One is the Palomino Gold Triad, and the other one is this Leather Brown Triad, or Warm Browns Triad. So we're going to put a highlight on that cylinder. So it's a lengthwise highlight. So it's the same highlights we just did, but smaller. A little bit of a wave there gets a highlight. Tiny highlight under there on those round shapes. The sphere on this bun gets a highlight. And again, we're ignoring the texture for now. Okay, ignore the texture. So this gets a smaller round highlight than the previous one. Keep working our way around. We get another little cylinder right along there. That light's going to come across and just catch that on the top. Light come across and we'll catch this cylinder shape fairly high up. We did the bun from the other side. And then there's two little waves in her at the front. Give them little highlights. Both sides. And then the top of her head needs that highlight as well. So it was a sphere. So it's kind of a round highlight, mostly towards the front. Okay. Sorry, I went off screen a little bit there. Now, we're going to go up to Golden Blonde. Do the same highlights again. Still ignoring the texture. We're going to go one step above this with white. Or with with white. And when we do that, we'll highlight just the highest highlights on the highest bits of raised texture when we do that bit. So there's that first cone. There's a second cylinder. We're going to do this bun, really just towards the front. And again, ignoring the texture. Okay. Do the wave. I'm sure people at Super Bowl are trying to do the wave right now. Go. Wave on both sides. This little cone exactly the same way. This roll same way. And on the top of her head, we're going to do a little bit of a halo effect. I have to adjust the camera so you can see what I'm doing here. So the light is coming this way, and this is the round shape on her head. So we're going to get that little bit of a halo effect like that in her hair. There's a person here at the studio yesterday taking a painting class, and they had very, very straight blonde hair pulled tight into a bun, and it was just like the perfect case study for the halo effect. And yeah, well, you shouldn't stare at people too much, I guess. I did explain to them that, like, your hair looks exactly like the halo effect right now. And they were like, yeah, I don't really know what that is. I'm painting. So my apologies to that person. I already apologized, I know. Don't stare at people when they're painting. Or at least tell them why you're staring. Okay, there we go. So the hair is looking pretty good now. Bring that back down. There she is. One more try. Jeff's eyes are shot. I can't tell whether I'm blurry on the screen or not. Gonna have to be happy with that. Wish there was a way I could make this bigger for me to be able to see, but I can't. Okay. Now, what are we on? White. We're going to use a little bit of white. Going to mix the white in with the amber gold, or the golden blonde. Really desaturate it with white, but also pump the value right up. And this is what we're going to do the final highlights with. And with this one, we will respect the sculpted texture. So I'm just hitting the raised strands of the hair with that little bit of white, just where those reflections would be the strongest. And do the same thing on that little wave on the front of her head. Somebody has decided to start sanding the wall next door. That's fun. Okay, and now we're going to do the same thing on the little bit of halo effect. Dab, dab, dab. Just on the sculpted hair. Same thing on the bun on the back, just the sculpted highlights. And then just a little bit along like that. That'll do. Hair's looking pretty good. Actually, most of it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I think the next thing to do, let's see how we're doing. We're at 2 hours, so I'm going to start doing the highlighting on the... What do I need to do first? The armor, or... I'm going to do the armor first. Okay. So, for the armor, the next thing we're going to do... So I did the brassy brass, we did the wash, and now we're going to get our tarnished brass color. Tarnished, wow. In English, tarnished brass. Get some of that on the palette. Now, that's my flow improver, so I don't want to get this mixed in with that. I'll put this up at the top, assuming that any paint will come out, which it always doesn't necessarily. Use a pin to open that up. I would normally use my dragon-headed pokey tool, but somebody broke it in painting class yesterday. Paint still does not want to come out of this jar. There we go. Oh, no, we're still not getting any paint. Feels like it might be empty. Can't be empty, it's practically new. That one. Doesn't look like it's actually cracked in the middle. The poor old dragon. I'll give him a new pin and fix him later. That's why the students can't have nice things. Glogzilla. That's a good name for him. Yeah, he's got... I always have a box of pins on the table because I break so many, knock the little beads off the end of them, trying to get the jars open. Okay, I'm not sure how well this tarnished brass color is going to work. Let's do it anyway. Okay, so I've worked it to be a flat, thin layer on the palette. I don't want a huge amount of paint on the brush. What I'm going to do is similar to what we were doing with the highlights earlier. I'm going to work towards the center of the highlight. So like on this breast armor on her chest, there's going to be two highlights. That one's going to be partly hidden by the cloth. This one is going to be pretty much out in the open. And it's going to be a round highlight. So I'm going to pull, because it's a round shape. So I'm going to pull the brush towards the center of the highlight. So pull from the shadow towards the highlight. And just leave a thin layer of the metallic paint behind. And I do not like the look of that paint at all. That is not making me happy. That looks really bad. I don't like it. I'm going to stop using that paint right now. That's gross. So I'm going to just quickly put a layer of brassy brass back over that. Just over the bit that I painted, so I don't have to do the wash all over again. I'm not using that paint for this. That is not going to work. We need something different. Balthazar Gold. That's my choice for today for bronze. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'll be a little bit more careful. So I'm grabbing Balthazar Gold, which is a GW paint. But it looks really good over the brassy brass. And I do quite like the Vallejo and GW metallics. So hopefully this is going to look nicer. Let's make sure my camera is positioned where I'm working. Okay. Now, let's try this a slightly different way. I'm going to put a little bit of the flow improver into the Balthazar Gold. Just the smallest touch of it. When you thin metallics with water, they fall apart really quickly. So just a touch of that flow improver. I should be able to thin it just a little bit. And it'll still work. And so the highlight that I made earlier, I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. Very light touch. And I'm pulling towards the center of where I want the highlight to be. With the Balthazar Gold, that's much nicer. That's what I was looking for. I like that much better. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on those bracers. With the bracers, the light is this way, so the highlight should be facing directly towards the light if it was a matte item. But it'll be just in from there if it's not. And that's how you would place the highlight if it was a non-metallic metal. But we're going to do the same thing with it even though it's true metallic. And that's going to exaggerate the natural highlight shine and give us a really, really shiny effect. Okay. And do the same thing on the other bracer. Not right at the light source, just a little bit down from the light source. And it's going to look super bright. Okay. I'm going to turn her around. This bracer on the right arm is going to get a little bit of bounce light from the ground, not much. So I'm just going to give it a very, just tiny highlight with this Balthazar Gold, just enough that it'll show up if natural light is hitting it. I'm going to do the edge of the breastplate and just a little bit above the shoulder or above the robe there, just a touch. Same thing on this side. Not under the armpit, just out from the armpit. Just a little bit on there. There we go. And then the bracer, almost not right on the top, but almost on the top, because the light's coming across. And we'll just bling that up a little. There, I like that much better. That's what I was looking for. Okay. And now we need to do the greaves. So on the greaves, this one, it's quite hard to see there. You can see it. There's a triangle shape on it. I'm going to highlight that triangle shape separately. And then I'm just going to do kind of the front edge of the lower part and the center of the upper part, just to give it a little bit of a highlight. And then the back corner, this little corner back here, just a little touch. Okay. And that's just because to make it look like, so the shape's defined, easier to pick out. Okay. And then for the greave on the leg, the light's coming this way. We're going to get a long highlight parallel to the cylinder. And it's going to be a little bit wider at the top. And it's going to narrow towards her ankle. So nice, bright brass highlight on her leg. Okay, and I'm not going to do much on the back side. I'll just put a little bit of a edge highlight along that. Just a touch. And the front of her shin already has this color on it. We'll just give it a second line of it. I'm happy with that. Okay. Now, the other leg. The other leg is much more shadowed. So I'm going to get the edge of the greave here. Okay, right there. So it's a bit of an edge highlight to bring that up to be more shiny. The upper edge of that little kneecap thing. But I'm still going to go underneath, do a little bit of a highlight on that line, little arrow-shaped line, and the edge of that knee piece to make it kind of stand out a little bit. And then we're going to do a little bit on the inside edge of the leg, like that. Just like that. And what the hell, let's put a line along her shin. Just a little line along the shin. I'm happy with that. Okay, did I forget anything that needs this color? No, I think we're good. Okay. So now we need to do the same thing with the gold. Now I already put the new gold on the palette a little while ago. It's probably pretty gross by now. It is, yeah. The paints, the metallic paints don't survive on the palette very long. So I think what I want to do, let's grab something weird. Let's do, I could use the Dragon Gold again. Or I think what I might try, I don't realize that I'm jumping all over the place with the paints a bit, but the Vallejo Game Air metallics are really, really nice. They're really smooth, very thin, and they're good for making very, very tiny highlights in metallics. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to highlight the gold in the small little gold jewelry things that we painted Dragon Gold earlier. I just need a tiny bit of that because it flows really well. I need a tiny little brush. I'm not going to need much paint on the brush. This paint goes a long way. A little bit on the brush. And I'm going to highlight everything that's gold. So that's going to be the armbands. I'm doing them the same way as I did the other ones, right? The highlight is not directly towards the light source. It's just a little off from the light source. Okay, that's good. hilt of the dagger. So yeah, there's not much that beats the Vallejo Game Air as a paint for highlighting true metallics. It's very, very thin, very smooth consistency paint. The pigments are well ground, and it's just really easy to work with. And you know, they're ready to go for the airbrush too, but I use them with the brush to highlight my other metallics. I love them for it. A little bit of gold and the little seashell shape on her shoulder, right up there. It's like a little seashell cone shape. Even if it's not, we're pretending that it is. And now we need to do the thing on her chest right there, which is basically like a little row of little squares. And the little crown that she's wearing, that's also like a bunch of little squares with a gold trim. I think this thing has like either a seashell or a little gem in the center of it. We'll pretend it's a seashell for today. We'll see how things go. We might do that one gem today. Yeah, really happy with the way those metallics are coming along. And then the final bit of metallic is going to be on the this big belt. So there's a lot of little gems on that belt. I don't want to get this on there. I'm going to paint those black before I paint them. I think they're going to be blue gems today. I do want to get this little trim around the big gem. Bling that up a little bit. There. And we need to do that on the back as well under here. Don't want to miss that. Okay. Now, about half an hour left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly put this leather brown color on the jewelry on her neck. I was planning to do a little bit of a freehand on that, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to put that leather color on there so we know that that's what that's supposed to be. I'm going to put leather on the hilt of the little dagger and on the scabbard of that little dagger so I can pick it out more easily, so I can see where it is. And I'm going to put it on this, on the cap of that little, it probably should be a piece of brass or something like that, but I'm just going to paint it leather for now. And on the back of the little dagger. Okay, now where are my leather straps? I'm going to pick out the edges of the leather straps as well. Belt pouch. I'm just doing this so I can see where it is. And I'm going to do the highlighting on the robe. I think is going to be the last thing that I'm going to do. We did bowstrings and painting a bow in the Lanaril video that we did back, I think it's video number 9 from the last set. So if you want to see how to paint a bow, how to highlight a bow, paint the bowstring, all that, there's an example of that there. But we haven't done any examples of a freehand yet. So that's what I'm going to do as the final thing on this mini for today. Yeah, I think that's going to be all we're going to have time for. My overall plan is to paint those gems green eventually, or aqua, teal. But I don't think we're not gonna have time for that today. Black gem, placeholder for eventual blue-green gem. I'll probably do that tomorrow. Okay, now the robe. We're going to do the robe. So our base coat on the robe is Snow Shadow. I'm going to flip over my paper towel now because the paper towel is full of metallic. My rinse water is pretty metallic. So I'm going to quickly change my rinse water. Be right. Okay, so now we're back. We're going to do the robe. So I already painted it Snow Shadow. I'm going to grab hold of my Snow Shadow here. I need just a little bit of flow improver. So I'm getting a fresh flow improver since the other one's full of metallic. There we go. Just a little bit of it in there. Okay. Perfect. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go along and just redefine the robe anywhere that I might have gotten like the black wash on it or hit it with the leather color or anything like that. I'm just going to tidy it up a little bit. That's going to be the first step. I really keep drifting off today. If I do that, I'll be in better shape. Okay. So the metallics are finished. I don't want to hit them with this. I'm going to be really careful. Just tidy it up everywhere. So this is everywhere that the black wash went when I was doing the metallics and the gold. Anywhere that the leather straps or whatever spilled over. Anywhere that I missed earlier, like right under here. I never painted that in the first place. We'll fix that. There we go. Same thing under here. The metallics have all spread right out over it. I'll tidy that up. So this is one of the keys to getting a nice bright white, is having the right color underneath it as a foundation. So I want this to, in the end, it's probably going to look a bit like a linen white or something like that, but I want it to really stand out from the leather and the skin and the gold and everything like that. So we're starting with the blue, which is a nice cold blue, and that's going to make it really lift out from the various warm colors we got going on in the background, like the leather and the warm gold, all that stuff, the warm skin tones. And then I'm going to highlight it with the dragon white. Is that dragon white? Let me double check. Yep. Oh, no, solid white. It's solid white. Still a cold white. The solid white is just a higher pigment density white. It's the Bones series white. Okay. Top of the shoulder, okay. Yeah, that's good enough. Look at that. Made a big mistake already. Love it. Okay, now I'm going to put some, just mix the solid white straight into that to make my first highlight. And these highlights are going to be pretty big. Okay, and I'm just going to do a big highlight on everywhere that's as a foundation for the future highlights. Not for the future highlights, what am I trying to say? I'm going to do a series of progressively narrower highlights, getting lighter and lighter. And it's going to look like white when I'm done. So same principle as before, the brush strokes go in the direction of the light source. So across her chest here, the light is this way. So the first brush strokes come this way, and then we reverse. And we go brush strokes, wow, come from the bottom up to where the main highlight is going to be, which is going to be about there. Brush strokes upwards. Like that. I'm not completely covering the snow shadow, okay? Like that. Do the same thing on this little bit of cloth. I'm going to do the same thing under here. But because this is mostly in the shadow, this is probably going to be as light as this gets. That's probably it for highlights under there. And then this piece out here. I hope you guys can't hear that too much. There's the people downstairs that promised me that they wouldn't play music this afternoon have decided they're gonna. And I can see the mic is picking it up, but I hope you guys are not hearing it. I hope it's not going onto the recording. That'll teach me to ask politely. Alright, and now we're going to go pretty much straight dragon white. Just a touch of the snow shadow in the mix. And I think I'll switch to the smaller brush now to be more precise. Coming up as white nicely. Okay, I'm gonna do that on the back as well. Not all the way to the bottom. Like this stuff is going to be in shadow, but the top of the shoulder up here is going to be highlighted white. Okay, and finally, straight white, just to really pick out the edges of the folds, the highest highlight. I don't know if you guys can hear the sounds out there. It's definitely getting picked up by the recording. I just hope Aaron's noise filter will be able to filter it out. You guys don't hear it at all? Okay, good. Yeah. All right. So then a freehand design on that would look something like, well, I think what I'm going to do, like I said, just a little bit of a blue pattern. And I'm going to do it just along this hem, along there. So let's do that now. A little bit of aqua. I think I'm going to switch to, where's that cheap plastic brush? Let's try this one. Got a brush with a nice long body on it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to thin this bit of aqua down quite a bit. I'm going to do a long single line. And the line, I'm going to start with it basically right in here by her hip. The line's going to go straight down. Like that. It goes under the little quiver. And then I'm going to follow the hem all the way along, keeping the line about the same distance from the hem all the way along. Nice simple little freehand. Key is that the paint is quite thin. Don't have much on the brush. And instead of trying to do like the whole line in one pass, I'm just doing a little bit at a time. The line's faint, so if I miss, it won't take much work to clean it up again. There we go. And we go right around onto the front to about there, and then we'll stop there. Okay. Now if I want to do a pattern on that, the pattern would be like, let's say if I was to do like a little wave curl thing, do another line parallel to that with a little wave curl. A little kind of a spiral mark like that. And we'll do that all the way along. So I've got my little pattern. Easy to paint, nothing complicated. Keeps with that sort of Amazon Greek motif. Each one is about the same size. And even if I make a mistake, as long as their position's about right, your eye is not going to notice any little mistakes. Go right to the end. And that'll be the last one there. Doop. And maybe one more. There we go. Little line of little marks. Now they don't show up very well. So we can go back, darken them down. You're going to want to shadow and highlight your freehand as well. So we already did that a little bit by having it all highlighted and shaded before we put the freehand on. But you can also, you know, add a little bit of black. And then redo the lines. So like down in there, it's going to be a little bit of a shadow. So I'll make that line darker colored in there. That's a shadow down there, so that'll be darker colored. in there maybe, in there. Okay, and then go the other way. We'll do a little bit of light, a little bit of white into the blue. And that lets us put a little bit of a highlight on the spots that need it. So highlighting the blue in the freehand so that it looks like it's part of the cloth. Kind of comes up there. A little highlight, a little bit there. Okay, and then the final step for any freehand is to glaze it in. So in this case, I've got the snow shadow as my main color. So why don't we do that? I'll just take a little bit of snow shadow, thin it way down, and then I'm going to glaze over the freehand with that, just to kind of push it back into the shadows a little bit. Tie it back into the cloth. Another way to do this with a little bit of ink, kind of help it recede a little bit. There we go, just like that. There, now we've got our little fancy freehand pattern, our fancy white cloak. It's all looking pretty good. And then the final step, as always, would be to go back and do a little bit of black lining. So just go and get a fine tip brush, not too much paint on there, very thin black paint or black ink, and anywhere two surfaces meet, put a black line in there to separate the shapes out again. And that'll give a lot of definition to your figure. Help any contrast that you made show it better. And it really helps the figure pop when it's being looked at a distance. That's the final step as always. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it for me for today. I'm gonna clean my brushes and get packed up. Thanks to everybody who hung out and chatted with me. I appreciate that very much. Hope you maybe even learned some ideas that you might use in your own painting. And if you enjoyed that, maybe consider ordering one of the minis and paint along in real time on one of these. I always slow down if I know there's people watching. For the people that are going to be watching this on YouTube later, they can always pause, get caught up. A little bit harder for the people that paint along real time, so we go nice and slow for them. All right. Thanks, Shaken. Glad to have you along on the journey today. And yeah, we'll see you guys again in the future.